Hey everybody, my name is Snitch, and welcome back to another episode of CO Select. Today's match is a tier 3 match on Caustic Finale. Caustic Finale is a really interesting map. Covered it before. It's this 4-base, mixed base map. Mixed base traditionally means maps where there's like, you know, there'll be bases in between bases essentially on altering countries. So, you know, I have like these two here, these two here, these two bases are in between these two and vice versa, and it's kind of mixed bases basically where you're playing from like multiple fronts at once. Entirely ground focused map. Pretty interesting. Central properties are generally this middle one, maybe these kind of three here are pretty playable, and then you obviously play a lot around the corners. Very easy to get artillery here in very effective positions. But yeah, these corner cities, these individual cities, and maybe like these three here are generally what you're playing for on this map. And yeah, it's pretty intense experience, especially compared to the rest of League. There's not really any maps that are like this. This one is very unique in that regard. Also a comm tower on the bottom left, giving you that juicy plus 10%. Today I'm playing Cobalt Ice, I'm playing Drake. Drake's state today is that his naval units gain an additional +1 movement, and +25 defense. Interesting, I didn't actually know that. Curious. And air units also lose 20% attack, and he's also not affected by rain, much like Olaf is not affected by snow. But his ground forces are perfectly fine, and that's kind of like the main reason I decided to choose him on this map, and the main reason I'm covering this game, because I ended up playing a Drake game, just to kind of try it out a bit and see how it went. And I think on this map, yeah, it's pretty fine. And any map, obviously he's very naval focused, but naval combat is not very common in AWBW due to the nature of the units being incredibly weak and expensive. Just kind of generally a bad combination. So Drake is traditionally not used for his main purpose, and he kind of ending up being a budget Olaf with his CO power, which is Tsunami, which deals 1 mass damage to all opponents. And I don't think his CO power makes it rain, but I might be wrong. And then Typhoon is his super, which deals 2 mass damage to all opponents and makes it rain for 1 day. So pretty impactful actually, much like Snow, increases the movement cost of a lot of units. In Fog of War, it reduces units' vision, but this isn't a Fog of War map, so not really as relevant. But basically Drake is kind of a budget Olaf. Also both of his powers do cut the fuel of all opposing units that it hits by half, which could be pretty significant against air units especially, but generally not as relevant against maybe ground units, but you can kind of force them into having no fuel eventually, and then like tanks might be unable to move if they're not able to repair in a reasonable time frame. But overall, Drake, generally not a super standard T3 choice, mostly due to the appearance of airports on a majority of maps, making him a lot weaker. He functions a lot better when air units are not involved, due to his air units being 20% weaker, which is quite substantial in comparison to somebody like I don't know, Jess or Sammy, for example. They only have a 10% decrease, which is not very noticeable with copters. Normally you can still get really strong first strikes on enemy copters and trade it to tanks really easily. But I think 20% is where it gets a little bit more noticeable for sure. And it's definitely a bit more punishing. And while his battle copters do still function generally how they do for other COs, when it comes to hitting tanks and stuff, they're definitely noticeably weaker. My opponent is Bubule today, playing Pink Cosmos. They're playing Andy. Andy, pretty interesting T3 CO, I'd say. I've been seeing a little bit more lately, getting a little bit more popular. He's basically the stall lord of T3. His playstyle generally revolves around trying to maintain as much of his unit, his army as he can, his unit count as he can, until he gets to his super. His day-to-day does not exist. He has no day-to-day abilities. Unlike Olaf, who at least is not, you know, disrupted by snow. Andy has literally nothing. Stock standard. His CO power hyper repair mass heals all of his allied units for 2 HP, and his super hyper upgrade heals his units for 5 HP, gives them a +1 movement boost for the turn, and an additional 10% firepower on top of the regular 10% that you get from using a super. So actually a very substantial super. And yeah, generally, like I say, Andy is mostly about trying to preserve as many units as you can, keep them on like mid to high HP, you know, 3 to 6 health, and then when you pop hyper repair or hyper upgrade, sorry, you get a bunch of value, you heal them all to full HP, and then you just take over the map. So yeah, he's generally about, much like Olaf is, where you're trying to play even until you get to your super. Even Drake in some ways is the same. Andy is kind of that playstyle, but to a whole other level, and really about trying to preserve units, get value trades, and then get a bunch of value out of his heal. So yeah, let's just get into today's game, shall we? Of course, Finale is definitely a weird map. Definitely takes some practice to get used to. So far, pretty standard stuff. You see both me and my opponent are moving for our neutral factories immediately. Always want to make sure to do this, so you can maximize your unit count effectiveness. Dun, dun, dun. I'm just imagining the Drake theme that I'll add in post. It's a great theme. Hope you're all enjoying it. Hope everybody's doing good today. So yeah, standard captures for me. Just capturing the properties closest to my base. My opponent actually pushes out for this comm tower section very early. I have to mirror it basically. If you don't end up mirroring this, normally you can end up falling behind in the comm tower push, and you can just end up getting your comm tower stalled for ages by like a suicidal tank or something. And while it sounds like it should be value, losing the comm tower for a really long time can kind of put you behind in trades on the rest of the map, and it snowballs very quickly. So I mirror my opponent and playing in this bottom left side. They're pushing out for some aggressive properties where they can, although fairly, you know, it's still fairly close to their bases, but just pushing out in the center of the map. Also generally a good habit. Normally want to go for You want to go for efficient properties that are closer to the enemy where you can. You don't want to be making like, inefficient moves, like skipping captures or anything, but generally you want to push out for cities closer to the center. My first tank's coming out on the south here. Once again, it's kind of a similar vibe. If I build a tank here, my opponent chooses to like build over here or something, I can pressure the comm tower very heavily. It could be a really awkward way to like get an early win, or at least put your opponent very behind for a while. So you see me kind of positioning up here, getting ready to capture these aggressive cities. My opponent actually does end up building the tank in the top right. Generally, this map kind of devolves into fighting around top left, bottom right, and in the center mostly. You can get some fights in this top right area, but they're generally really hard to do because the reinforcement line is so close with your enemy's base. Push my tank out here. I actually end up just going over here. Could have just gone straight to the left maybe, but I want to pressure these like central infantry as well. Just take a nice neutral position. I'll start capturing this city, which I may get if my opponent chooses not to interrupt. Getting these properties close to my HQ. Yeah, pretty standard stuff so far. I decided to capture these top left properties. Sorry, the comm tower capture. They actually pulled 2 infantry down here, trying to threaten my comm tower. Like I said, it's pretty standard thing to do, or it can be if you choose to, you know, give more resources here. They go for a free attack on this infantry on the city with the tank. Although, you know, I mean, yeah, it is technically a free attack, but this kind of attack feels kind of wasted. Because I am just going to repair a bit, but I suppose that is an extra 200 funds of damage to me, technically, because I have to spend 200 repairing. And they're trying to capture these bottom right properties as well, so pushing into both of the corners early. Start capturing my comm tower. They might go for an interrupt, but, you know, it's just I'll have to take it. I end up taking this free infantry in the center instead. His tank is obviously not in range. So instead of protecting here, especially because this infantry is covered by the tank, it's very hard for my tank to do anything without taking a big hit in return. So, I mean, I could have blocked and hit it and then taken a big hit on my tank and guaranteed my comm tower. But instead I just take the free infantry. You know, free dudes. So I capture this bottom right property. Choosing not to interrupt here. Just looking to get captures instead. I do get this aggressive property here, which is quite good. This is a bit of more of a neutral one, a bit harder to obtain. I'm trying to capture this top left corner as well. And I end up trying to go for a interesting block on this tank and then build my own tank. I think maybe I could have done it a bit better, but I think it was kind of an interesting idea. To try and punish this aggressive tank attack. I built another tank down here. This should be able to punish this infantry if it does go for the interrupt on my comm. And yeah, my opponent's next turn. Finish capturing up here. They start trying to aggressively capture my city. I thought it was pretty weird, but yeah. And they take a hit on this infantry. They didn't capture the comm tower yet. It's a little bit of a mistake, but nothing too big a deal. Probably wouldn't have changed the trade much. And yeah, they do go up here, take out my 1 infantry. The tank hits this other infantry as well for 6 damage. And they build another tank to reinforce the area. They do get the interrupt on my comm tower. This tank goes onto the city, covering some space. Build another tank on the left, another tank in the top right. Yeah, some sad stuff. Yeah, I'm not really sure about this capture. This just seems extremely greedy to me. Like, you're obviously never going to get this realistically. You could have just interrupted me if you wanted to get something valuable with this infantry, but this just seems kind of pointless. Finish the capture up here. Move the tank down to the bottom left to get this interrupt. This tank could come and hit me, but I have kind of the tanks chaining, and I can build another one if I want to reinforce. Start capturing some of these neutrals here. I do interrupt this property just to kind of like take the because by attacking here, it's harder for my opponent to commit attacking here because they want to like stop this infantry, right? So I'm kind of just trying to guarantee that I get these neutrals. I'm not sure it's totally valuable though. I do use the infantry to block this tank hit, like I said earlier, the free tank, which frees this tank up to do something else if I want to. Take a first strike on this tank up here. And I end up pulling these infantry back, because I don't want to lose them for nothing. I build another tank to reinforce, so if my opponent brings this tank up and hits, you know. Overall, this ended up being a kind of weird play. I'm not sure it was really worth it, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, so just a shame it didn't really work out like I planned. I do hit this infantry that struck me last turn on the completed city. It was kind of weird. Moving some other infantry forwards. They are going to get this aggressive property here, which is pretty good for them. I built an artillery in the south as well. I did mention artillery in the corners on this map can be pretty effective. Quite impactful. They choose to attack with this infantry instead of capturing, and then they combine. So they join on the thing. They also hit this infantry with that infantry. I'm going to get my comm tower in 2 turns now, because I did commit the attack to killing the infantry. So my opponent doesn't have a comm tower advantage right now. Like I say, they do hit this infantry instead of interrupting my capture, so I'm going to get both of these captures here. Again, they take another first strike on an infantry on a city. This is just kind of a bad habit, I think, because I'm just going to heal to 8, and then I get a first strike with a defense advantage at the same HP. It doesn't really make any sense. So. They do move up here for this first strike of this tank. It actually gets a 7-0, which I thought was kind of crazy. I didn't expect how much damage I would take, so overall this play ended up working out not very well for me at all. Tank does survive the AHP infantry. Once again, pushing up for another offensive capture in a situation where I have a lot of infantry, and these infantry aren't committed to any other fight. So it's just throwing away units. I thought it was really weird for my opponent. It's kind of like, maybe they just wanted to charge their super really aggressively. Again, you know, another first strike on an infantry on a city. I guess they have a second one here, but... Wasn't really sure about my opponent's playstyle here for the most part. Just taking a lot of offensive attacks where they didn't really make any sense. At least in my opinion. Tank comes down the left, tank comes on the top right. I'm gonna hit this infantry capturing the city, gonna finish it off with the 2-hit. Interrupt this infantry here. Get another big 2-hit, finish it off with the 4 HP. So my opponent just kind of sacks 2 infantry for nothing. Pulling these infantry back on the city, just get healed a bit on the front line. I have a 5-2 here, so I'm feeling pretty confident I can hold this property with the reinforcements I have. Moving this artillery up in the bottom right. Hit this infantry back, you know, again, I just get a really big hit. Take a first strike on this tank, because I'm going to build another tank down here probably, so this is kind of like a free first strike. Even with the chaining tank, I'll have a chain as well. I have another tank down here, which can help as well. I hit with this 4 HP infantry. I think because, yeah, I couldn't hit from the top or else I'd be in range of the tank, so I had to sack my 4 HP infantry to kill this one. Otherwise I would have been able to get responded on. So this tank isn't really covering this fight yet, but, you know, it is close enough. Put another tank down here to cover. I end up just picking up this infantry instead of hitting the tank. Just so I can have better terrain, I suppose. And again, like these tanks are all chaining, so anytime I hit this, I'm taking another hit back, and I've already seen that hasn't worked very well. So I do pull the 1 HP tank back onto the HQ just to get a bit of healing. Not a huge win, but not a huge loss either. Opponent's next turn, they pull this infantry back to the city. Just very strange there. They finish up this 3 HP infantry on the city as well, kind of sacking the 7 HP, but blocking, maybe to try and get this capture. They start capturing this top right property as well, instead of killing my infantry. The tank gets a big... Oh, the tank moves over from the left to the right and then hits this infantry on the city. They do a 2-hit, but the tank is too weak to actually get the 2. Again, another hit on an infantry on a city. I guess it's just... Maybe it's just like trying to charge power. I wasn't really sure what my opponent's playstyle. This game is really weird. Instead of finishing up the city on the infantry, they choose to hit this one on the mountains. Also kind of strange. Moving these infantry up again. Once again, trying to threaten capture some of my properties, but I have so many units in this area. This tank comes off down here to cover the comm area. Infantry hits my infantry. Another tank comes to the center, gets a big strike on this tank. But I have another one ready to get a first strike in return. There's no tank chaining this now, so this is kind of just a free first strike. He takes the first strike here. And it's actually a 2-hit with the 7 HP tank, but not enough damage. But once again, you know, pretty good trade for my opponent. Well, I feel like you do have to question, like, are these... I guess it's like forcing super is kind of how I felt about it. Just really aggressive trades. And if they don't lose the units, it's a lot of value. But a lot of these infantry are dying, you know? I just feel like it's kind of not as good if the infantry are all being killed. So I take the first strike on this tank, get an 8-5. Finally finished my comm tower. Took a while. Like I said, stalling the comm tower, it gave my opponent a lot of advantages in these trades. You kind of see the value of them just throwing units. Like, they lost 2-3 infantry doing this, but they got a lot of value trades on the rest of the map, so... Finish off with this capping infantry. Supers are getting kind of close. I could use Typhoon or Tsunami here, but generally just waiting for Typhoon's a bit more effective. It's kind of weird against Andy because obviously the repair factor makes it so... Finish all this off my artillery. They kind of counter my power, right? You know, quote unquote. So I have to be really cautious about how I use it. Get these picks in the top left, finish off the, or start, interrupt this capturing infantry, move the war infantry up. I finally have a tank, and I moved my tank from the HQ over to here, because then a 5 HP tank can still control this area pretty solidly. Pull this tank back to get healed, finish off this 6 HP tank. I hit this infantry that hit me from the mountains, I just hit back. I finish it off with the 4 HP infantry on the city. Again, just more unit count kind of being thrown away by my opponent. Sit my infantry on these properties to spare them. I ended up just dropping a medium tank up here because I don't really want to lose this city. And it's only a 9 HP infantry, so it's still 2 turns. I think if I just drop a medium tank, it would kind of prohibit my opponent from being able to take this. Or really continue fighting in this area with all these tanks. All these tanks kind of become pointless, you know? Until my opponent can like get an artillery up and set up a wall. But they have no infantry in this area anymore, so... This should be able to protect this economy. And I do have a slight economic lead right now, so I'm, you know, if I can just maintain the board state, it's pretty good for me inevitably if I don't burn too much material. Once again, they go for this offensive capture, but it's in range of 3 infantry, like, just very weird stuff. They take a big hit on this infantry for the city, that's pretty good, but they are in artillery range. Another hit. Tank actually moves down, gets a hit, but it's only 3 damage because it's a half HP tank. But I don't have any units to punish it, so it's still pretty good for my opponent overall. They finish off this infantry on the city. Did I forget to attack with that? Or did I just drop to 4 HP? I just want to check if I actually hit with this AHP infantry. I may have just missed it, which would be pretty sad. Yeah, looks like I just forgot to attack here. So actually it makes this loss pretty bad for me, because this should have been like a 4 HP infantry or something against 6, and then actually probably wouldn't have lost this infantry, so definitely a mistake from me there. Just missed a unit, happens. It's kind of the nature of asynchronous stuff as well. Sometimes, like, in live games, that kind of mistake happens way less, I imagine. But when you play like an asynchronous game, it can be easy, like, to lose track of a board state you haven't seen for a few turns, or a few days even, not turns. So my opponent gets some good hits in. Super's getting very close. I pick up this tank. They hit this infantry. Pick up this infantry, and you really start to notice that I'm having a focus on trying to finish as many units as possible. I really don't want to leave any units alive, because that's just giving more value to hyper upgrades. So at this point, I'm really trying to focus on picking off units where I can. I start capturing this city with the 9 HP. Like I said, 3 infantry covering this city, so I'm just gonna like get this infantry to 1 HP. Sad I didn't get the knockout, but I do leave it. Anyway, for to reinforce. I hit with this medium tank, which put it in range of their medium tank, but I put an artillery here. Obviously, it's not great to shoot from a base, but if they do want to go for this first strike, I should be able to finish it off with artillery medium tank in response. Cycle my units around on the bottom side, kind of reposition a bit. Pick up this infantry from the city. I have tanks kind of covering this, like 2 tanks kind of chaining to this one, so, you know, in theory, should be able to protect this tank. Maybe a first strike on the tank is a bit better, but not sure. They start moving their thing down, and then my opponent makes the really weird decision of activating hyper repair. Maybe they just misclicked. I didn't even realize they had a full bar here. I feel like this had to have presumably meant to be hyper upgrade, but you will notice that I have limited the board. I was playing around hyper upgrade this turn as well, assuming my opponent would get it, but if you look at the board state, you will notice that I have limited the actual value it gets. Basically finishing off all my opponent's low HP units where I can, actually finishing units where I can. You know, there is this tank here, it's going to get full heal, but it's not really in a great position to have much threat, and I do have a tank kind of covering a lot of these units. This infantry will get healed to 6 HP, but obviously it can't finish the capture this turn. And that's pretty much it as far as the healing will go. So maybe that was my opponent's thought for activating just the regular power. Maybe they didn't want to overcap their charge, or I don't know, maybe they just felt like hyper repair wasn't enough of a value, but they did want to, like, obviously if you're sitting on a full bar and you're not using it, you're wasting all the generation you get, right? So maybe my opponent's thought process is, if I don't use my CO power now, I'm wasting additional charge, but it's not really worth committing to hyper upgrade right now. I'll just commit to hyper repair, get a bit of a heal, and then get the CO power bonus, the 10-10 for the turn. Maybe they felt like that was worth it. Not really sure, honestly. It was definitely a bit weird. They do pick off this infantry here. Get a hit with this tank, get a 9-5, pretty juicy. Lose another infantry on the bottom right. They start trying to capture this bottom property, but dare I say it again, you know, I've got a bunch of units covering this. Doesn't really make any sense. Start trying to capture this top left property. Move in with the tank. Actually, this one's a little bit more reasonable, but it's only a 9 HP infantry, so I still have a lot of turns to actually deal with it. Medium tank actually comes down instead of taking the first strike because of the artillery, I assume. So good cover from my myself there, you know, if I do say so myself. We start taking some strikes at the center. Typhoon is now available. And now that my opponent, the other thing is, like, you can argue this matchup is very, like, a game of chicken, right? Where I don't want to use my power unless I'm going to get a bunch of value, because if I don't kill all the units, then my opponent will just super in return and get a bunch of value back, right? So you could definitely argue there's, like, a sense of a game of chicken there, where we're both kind of, like, trying to bait each other into using the power inefficiently. But yeah, I'm really not sure about the hyper repair in this match. Do end up dropping Typhoon, instant value damage. It's 20k value, a bit less 15k value, not bad at all. Move this medium tank down, get the pick off here. Also limiting my opponent's movement here. You know, if you track these movements, especially when planes are involved, you know, these vehicles suddenly can't move at all, so definitely a lot of value in that regard. Do end up finishing this tank, pull this infantry back to get healed, start capturing the city again with a new infantry. This is a good habit to get into, is like, if you have another infantry present, just cycle, because like there's still going to be 2 turns, and this would be ages, you know? It's faster to just restart it with a new infantry. See, like, even aggressively position the artillery, because none of these units can reach it, and it's just, like, punishing my opponent for walking up. I just take the hit with this tank. Should have had a bit of an advantage. And I just block it with my infantry and all the rest of my infantry. Just getting this tank captured and trapped with a reinforce. This frees me up to get this hit here. This tank can no longer cover this this infantry. So normally this would be a 9 HP tank that could reach my tank, but now it's a 7 HP tank next turn that can't even reach it, so lots of value. Just moving infantry up into the center now. And I'm bringing some units down here maybe to threaten my opponent's comm tower. They seem really set on like fighting this comm area, so why not join them? Got all these tanks sitting on cities getting ready to get repaired. Yeah, infantry takes a strike from the mountain. Tank hits here. It just feels like such aggressive unit throwing for my opponent. Maybe they are just like trying to build charge, so they're taking a lot of fights, but a lot of these fights don't feel efficient for them. Like, you can look at the unit count right now, and I just have such a drastic advantage. It's just because of the amount of units that my opponent's just throwing away. They do get a big hit here with the medium tank from the city. I think I just didn't see that, or I just didn't really care. One or two. Infantry does hit. Tank waits on the city in range of artillery, which is kind of interesting. Tank takes a big hit here, but on my tank, it does not get the finish off, and even though the infantry could have broken it, this could have ran away, like happened, but they did it in reverse, and they're going to end up losing the tank and not killing my tank as well, so a bit of a disaster. This city will get captured next turn if I don't interrupt it, but I do have infantry in range. And as you can see, get the interrupt there, bring this infantry down, bring it to 1 HP, finish off this tank, interrupt this capture with a double hit, pick off that infantry, moving more infantry forwards, once again putting the tank back to get repaired. Big hit on this tank, putting it to 2 HP. Hit this infantry, finish it off. Pull this tank up to finish off this tank, and then I can start capturing my opponent's properties in the bottom right now. Pretty much a 1 location. I even start capturing this one on his face as well. Just trying to pull tanks down here. Just really trying to pull any reinforcements that I can from this upper area. 2 hit this tank and just take it out. You have to wonder why my opponent went for that strike. Not really sure. Pull this infantry back to get healed a bit, take a hit on the infantry on the mountains, interrupt this capture even more. Hyper upgrade once again, getting pretty close, so I do have to be a bit cautious, especially even just doing like the calculations of like, if my opponent attacks me this turn, how much damage value they get. I also finished this property, by the way, so it puts me 3k up ahead now, pretty good. How much damage will they get? Like, I have to be kind of cautious of giving my opponent too good a hyper upgrade, especially with the medium tank sitting on the map. Like, very easy for this to like survive at 2 or 3 HP and then get a bunch of hyper upgrade value. So I built 3 tanks this turn and an infantry. Really starting to accelerate the unit count because of just my huge my economy value at this point, as well as enabling me to buy a lot of vehicles. My opponent finally picked up an artillery on the left, and they ended up double base skipping. I forgot to mention. I think because they just took such a monetary hit from the Typhoon. They ended up having to like double base skip to get this infantry or this tank artillery turn out. So they're really falling behind. Take a first strike here, but it's in range of artillery. If I can finish off this medium tank next turn, it's fine for me. Otherwise, it could be pretty bad. And they should have started popping hyper repair again, which I mean, maybe they just feel like they're too behind at this point. Maybe they were trying to calculate a hyper upgrade and they couldn't find one. But once again, they pop hyper repair, healing up this medium tank. They pick up this infantry with the capturing infantry. Hit down here in the bottom left, get a 2 hit. Move on to the city to strike my infantry, moving the artillery up. this infantry hits from the city. It's just so super. Some of these attacks are just super weird. They do finish off a 3 HP tank with their tank. So my next turn, they did interrupt this capture, but I'll still get it next turn. So I just aggressively take hits here. Even with this tank reinforcing, I'm just going to hit aggressively and just keep capturing. Because even if they strike the tank, I'm going to get the city, and that's the real victory here. Even capturing this port for the same reason. Just forcing my opponent, you know, I keep talking about it recently, of just like making your opponent make it so whatever choice they make, they lose something, right? If they choose to interrupt this city with the tank, I'm gonna get a free hit with the tank. If they choose to hit this tank, I'm gonna get the city. Always making it sure, no matter what option they take, has a negative result for them is what you should be aiming for. Finish off this capturing infantry. Pull this tank down in the bottom left now. Now my vehicle advantage is really being shown just across the map. I have so many more vehicles like everywhere else while still maintaining a fairly even fight up here. Although I did take a big first strike on my medium tank this turn, so... Oops, apologies. That's a bit dangerous. So I do protect my comm tower once again. I take a first strike on here. I artilleried into the medium tank, but I know it's 3 damage during the CO power, I suppose. Pull the medium tank onto the city, which is kind of exposing my artillery. Get a 2-hit on this infantry. It doesn't quite die, sadly. And I'm just moving infantry forwards. I'm probably going to end up joining these next turn, and then I have a 3-turn cap on the comm tower. So now I've won the kind of the comm tower area. My opponent isn't really able to build vehicles down here. It should enable me to pressure the comm tower again. I actually pushed up to 22k because I won... I don't know which property I won this turn. I won a property somewhere. I'm even capturing this property as well. Like, I'm just aggressively positioning my infantry and properties now. I even built another artillery up here to kind of like cover this artillery. Prohibiting the medium tank from pushing any deeper. So this tank comes down, interrupts the capping infantry here. This tank comes up, finishes off this tank with the other one. I lose the 3 HP tank as well. Medium tank moves in. Doesn't quite get the knockout on my medium tank, so it is going to survive. They choose to interrupt this city, which is going to give this one to me on the bottom right. 1 HP infantry sacks. Get another hit here. Artillery moves forwards. It's kind of a precarious position, but he's not really threatening any captures yet, so I can just kind of retreat away from it for now. Another offensive infantry attack. Another medium tank comes out here. But I do already have an artillery in position, so I have tools to kind of help deal with it a little bit. Oh. Damn it. I can't keep getting away with it. There we go. Oh, my next turn here. I could have gone for a tsunami this turn maybe, but I think I'm just holding up another Typhoon. I finished capturing this property, now at a 7k income advantage, so tank a turn. Pretty substantial. Finish off this infantry, start capturing the central property finally. Moving more units forwards, just trying to even like threaten surrounding this medium tank. I end up picking off this medium tank with an artillery hit. I don't attack with the one from the factory, just the 9 HP. Does the 4 damage. I can finish it off with the medium tank on the city, and I can pull this one back just to cover and not block my own factory. Start moving my infantry down again. You know, these artillery are covering each other, hitting into this with a medium tank here, and building a reinforcing tank. It's just going to be impossible for my opponent if they want to play aggressive up here, so... I'm just moving my infantry out already. Start capturing this property of theirs. Pretty standard endgame stuff here. Just really taking advantage of my massive unit count advantage and trying to, you know, get back out of my economy wherever I can. Did I say 7k advantage? I guess I meant... Or maybe they captured a property back somewhere? I think I'm losing my mind, I don't know. Oh, now it is 7k on this turn, so... Oh, I guess it just didn't update for whatever reason. Yeah, it is 7k now. I'm not crazy. So, medium tank comes down here, hits my tank for a big hit, but I do have an artillery posturing. They finish off this capturing infantry. See, I'm just wasting so many tank attacks. These tanks are coming up, trying to hit these artillery. But this formation is so tight now with the second tank here as well, that this is almost always going to be a losing fight for my opponent so close to my bases. Even if they finish off the infantry, it's just not going to get them enough value. And it does pull me into another Typhoon range as well, which means it's going to be an even harder turn for my opponent. Artillery gets the knockout on my 1 HP infantry, but not a big deal. They're trying to capture this property again. It's fairly unrealistic. Medium tank comes out on the left, triple base hit for my opponent. You see the economic advantage is really starting to hurt now. Drop Typhoon again. This time it's 14k value? 16k? I can count. Finish off this tank with my medium tank. Pull the artillery back to the HQ, which opens up this first strike. 5 HP infantry doesn't quite get the kill on the 1 HP tank. So sad. Artillery gets a big hit here. I'm just pulling tanks forward. Just hitting this medium tank. I start capturing their factory, forcing a response here. Still hitting this medium tank. I really need to finish it though, because the hyper upgrade is here, but I do manage to pick it off with the infantry. Very clutch. moving infantry forwards here, start capturing this port. You know, they're gonna have to interrupt this infantry here, which means I'm gonna get this port as well. Another win. Start capturing this city just really aggressively. Pick off this infantry. Finish off the 1 HP tank, blocking these tanks in. Like I say, just a really losing fight for my opponent. Just too close to all my reinforcement lines. I get enough return hits in. I have Typhoon. A hyper upgrade is gonna get some value here on this tank, especially, but I'm feeling really confident about this area just based on the unit composition. Join cap here so I can threaten this city next turn. Pick up this infantry in the middle. This medium tank can't really get anywhere with the rain on. Really limited in its movement. I block the infantry with tanks as well. I've also started threatening the comm tower. But I block the infantry with tanks, so this infantry can't get another interrupt because my opponent's had a really aggressive interrupting playstyle this game. So I'm just really trying to lock on any cities where I can. I just decided to just aggressively interrupt this capture, which lets me plant a tank on this city. So I have 2 tanks and there's an artillery here with no wall, so should be able to finish it off pretty soon. Opponent's next turn. Down to 7 unit count now, have a 30 unit advantage. They do pop hyper upgrade, but they end up resigning because there's just not enough to be done. Like, this tank can't move anywhere. These tanks are pretty much surrounded. They can barely move as well, so they're both going to go down next turn. They can't really get any value. 9k economic lead for me now. I'm going to get all next turn. What's the capture limit on this map, actually? 27. So I needed 3 more captures and I would have had the game. So I would have got 2 here, and then I only did 1 more city, and I would have won just off capture limit. So, you know, I think like getting something like this is pretty feasible, or getting like this one is pretty feasible. But yeah, I mean, my opponent's just been forced too far behind. You know, the economy really started coming against them at a certain point. But yeah, I think you know, you can kind of see how Drake plays very similarly to Olaf, especially in a but whenever air isn't involved. If air is involved, it's a lot more awkward, but in this kind of game, I felt like he was an interesting pick. Just wanted to try a Drake game. I feel like I got a little bit counter-picked, but the game still ended up working out in my favor. Generally, I think my opponent was just a bit too aggressive, looking for a lot of aggressive trades, even when they didn't really make sense, and they were just really inefficient. And then, yeah, I ended up getting a lot of value from Typhoon both times, and my opponent's weird decision to use hyper repair instead of hyper upgrade really ended up making them fall behind in the long run, I think. But overall, I think it was a pretty interesting game. It was definitely fun to play Drake for a round. Maybe I'll try some more maps where it makes sense. It's just hard because there's so many maps that have airports and important airports, and I don't think Drake really fits those maps very well. But of course, Finale is a pretty cool map where he could be picked in tier 3, so I decided to give it a go. And it was a pretty fun game. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of CEO Select. My name is Midzich. Thank you guys very much for checking out. If you did enjoy today's content, make sure to leave a like. It really helps out the channel. You can also comment down below. Also helps the channel. I love reading analysis, so give me your thoughts on the game and what you thought. And you can also subscribe for more content like this. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I will see you next time. Have a good one. Peace.